You cannot embody a new identity while still punishing yourself for surviving the old one. In this video, I'm going to explain why the past resurfaces after identity shifts, why guilt becomes magnetic, and how forgiveness is actually the mechanism that allows the new version of you to stabilize. Something is definitely ready to be released here. When you declare yourself to be something new, it's not just the opposite that becomes magnetic. It's everything that you haven't forgiven yourself for. And this is where people get confused because they think they're being pulled backwards, when in reality, they're being invited to complete something. A new identity doesn't just create forward motion, it creates honesty. It turns the lights on inside of your system. And when the lights come on, anything that was surviving in the dark becomes visible. Remember and keep in mind that this is not to shame you, it's not to punish you, but it is because this needs to finally be released. So when you say things like, I trust myself, every moment that you didn't trust yourself may begin to arise. When you say, I am confident, every time you silenced yourself might come up. When you say, I am abundant, every decision you made out of fear may begin to resurface. And this is because your system is saying, these are the things that we're ready to let go of now. Here is the truth that most people miss. You cannot embody a new identity while still punishing yourself for surviving the old one. You cannot embody a new identity while still punishing yourself for surviving the old one. The old version of you didn't exist because you were weak. It existed because you were adaptive. This identity learned how to keep you safe. It learned how to get you through. It learned how to help you belong, how to cope, and how to endure. So when you step into a new identity, these old strategies don't just suddenly disappear. They come forward and they ask you to ask yourself, am I finally ready to rest and stop fighting? This is why regret tends to show up. This is why guilt resurfaces. And this is why thoughts like, I should have known better, begin to appear. It's not because you need to relive them. It's because you're ready to stop identifying with them. And before I go further, I want to say this. If what you've been feeling right now is grief or tiredness or a strange lull or quiet after a whole bunch of emotional movement, that's the nervous system completing. Forgiveness always opens the door for grief, self-trust, and finally peace. Self-forgiveness is not saying it didn't matter. It's saying it makes sense that you did that thing. It's saying it makes sense that I didn't know better yet. It's saying it makes sense that I chose safety over truth. And here is the part that changes everything. Forgiveness releases the emotional charge, not the memory. Okay? Forgiveness releases the emotional charge, not the memory. You don't need to forget what happened. You have to stop carrying it in your body. Most people try to move into the new identity by bypassing this step. I was one of those people. They'll do things like affirm and visualize and push. But underneath, there is still a quiet self-punishment running the program. Saying things like, I wasted time, I failed myself, I should have been further by now, I should have known better. And that inner tension becomes a magnet. But remember, that is not your declaration. So when the past resurfaces after an identity shift, the work is not to analyze it. The work is to meet it with neutrality. To say, in a loving, understanding way, I see you. I understand why that happened. But it's also saying, you don't need to protect me anymore. That is what integration looks like. Not emotional processing forever, but emotional completion. And here is how you know you're doing it correctly. Okay? The memory arises, but your body doesn't collapse or shut down. The thought appears, but you don't spiral. There is compassion instead of contraction. That is how you know that forgiveness is landing somatically. And when forgiveness lands in the body, then the magnetism dissolves. And that is because there is nothing left for you to resolve. So, if you declared a new identity and you suddenly felt heavier or slower or more reflective, that doesn't mean you made a mistake. It means you stopped running, and it means you stopped trying to override yourself. That you finally created enough safety to release what you've been carrying for years. This phase isn't about becoming more, it's about carrying less. Less guilt, less self-blame, less internal violence. And once that weight drops, embodiment becomes natural. Confidence becomes quiet. Trust becomes embodied. And power becomes stable. Not because you forced it, but because there's nothing left inside of you arguing with it. So, if the opposite appeared, if the past resurfaced, if forgiveness is what's being asked of you right now, nothing is wrong. You're not delayed. This is your system trying to unburden itself. And once that self-forgiveness completes, the identity you chose no longer needs effort to maintain. Why? Because it simply becomes who you are. Remember that the opposite doesn't show up to stop you. It comes so that you can finally let yourself be free. So if you're in a season where the past feels closer than usual, where old versions of you keep coming up for air, remember that you didn't summon this because you're weak. You summoned it because you're finally strong enough to stop carrying it. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it does release the body from reliving it. And once that release begins, something else always follows. Grief. Honest grief. The grief of letting go of who you had to be to survive. In the next part, I'm going to talk about what happens after forgiveness, how grief completes, how self-trust stabilizes, and how your nervous system finally stands down, because that's the moment everything stops feeling like work. Now, if this resonated, stay with me and remember that you're not moving backwards, that you are closing the loop.